Here at CBS News Colorado, we want to share with you how a story came together. Your reporter behind the story offers that insight. Thanks so much for being with us. I'm Karen Lee. Well, right now, we look into a CBS Colorado investigation about donations made from the public to people or victims of tragic events. Our investigators found it's often difficult for those victims who need the funds to actually get them. November 19th marked 1 year since a shooting at Club Q in Colorado Springs that claimed 5 lives, left 17 others with gunshot wounds, and changed so many more lives. Some of those victims are struggling to receive money that was donated to them. CBS News Colorado investigators have obtained a petition that was signed by dozens of mass shooting victims in Colorado, demanding accountability of a nonprofit that is collecting donations in their name. Your investigator, Katie Weiss, and producer Austin Erblad joins us now for their exclusive story. And Katie, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, Karen, this petition that we obtained actually here, it's a letter to Governor Polis and several other state leaders really demanding that an audit be conducted into the finances of what's called the Colorado Healing Fund. It's an organization that has been collecting donations for mass shooting victims in Colorado since 2018. Well, this letter even calls for the Healing Fund to be shut down because victims feel it's been, quote, unethical in the way that it's handled money meant for people who have lived through unimaginable trauma.
It's actually a lot worse.
Ashton Gamblin was shot 9 times while working the door at Club Q 1 year ago. She's one of dozens of mass shooting victims who signed this petition delivered to state leaders Monday.
There was times where me and my husband were kind of staring at each other since I wasn't working about, are we going to be able to pay this bill this month because we're waiting on a healing fund check?
As if surviving 9 gunshot wounds wasn't hard enough, she says she's had to beg to receive donations. She says the Healing Fund refused to pay for things like a service dog or a shower bench after she got out of the hospital.
Their original process was, hey, if you send us the bill, we'll review it, and then if we determine that's something, we'll reimburse you. I can't pay my bills on a reimbursement. I don't think anybody in this country can live off of a reimbursement plan.
Originally, the fund said it would keep 10% of the more than $3 million donated for operational costs, but changed that to 0% after victims pushed back. Then this fall, the fund was holding on to more than $120,000, and victims fought back again.
We're tired of fighting.
Just a few days ago, the fund announced it's sending survivors the remaining money, saying it was holding it for long-term needs, but that victims made it clear their immediate needs were more important.
This is their money, and they're entitled to it.
Legal advocates like Z. Williams say this isn't the first time the Healing Fund has come under fire.
It's not an equity-based system.
Following the grocery store shooting in Boulder, documents from the Healing Fund show it collected a 5% administrative fee from the more than $4 million in donations. And $900,000 went to a resource center that some victims who live out of town can't use.
It's very alarming every time this happens.
Advocates like Dr. Zachary Blair with Victims First say donated money should be handed out in equal checks for all victims so they can spend the money for whatever they need to heal.
The victims of mass shootings are adults. They have bills. They have responsibilities. They don't want a nonprofit parent. They don't need a nonprofit parent.
The Colorado Healing Fund declined an interview, but said in a written statement, quote, "We have a responsibility to verify and prioritize needs. In some cases, we disperse funds for specific requests. In other cases, we disperse funds in lump sum form, so those who received it could prioritize their own needs." Advocates say right now there isn't much government oversight over how nonprofits choose to spend money donated for victims. Some states require nonprofits collecting donations for tragedy victims to have regular independent audits. But that's not the case in Colorado, something many victims are demanding.
Without an independent audit, it's really hard to trust their numbers. They've been very inconsistent.
The Healing Fund says it's audited every year, but the organization's tax forms show since the organization opened in 2018, it hasn't reported any audits to the IRS until just last year. And the fund refused to send us copies of the audits it says were completed.
I will not quit until some form of change has been made.
So frustrating for so many of those victims. Katie and Austin, thank you so much for both of you being with us and sharing a little light, shedding a little light, of course, into the backstory of this. Katie, how did this story first come together for you? How did you first learn about the problems?
Well, this is definitely a long work in progress. We've been working on this for several months. It started really when we started hearing concerns from Marshall Fire victims in Boulder about their problems with not getting money that was donated to their cause. And after I started looking into that, I realized, wow, time and time again in Colorado's history, we continue to see the similar complaints from victims of these mass tragedies where they just aren't receiving the money that was donated to help them. So I felt like with so many different, unfortunately, tragedies that we've had in our state's history, I felt like it was important for us to team up and work together and really dig deeper into this. How did it feel for you once you started learning more about this issue?
Yeah, there was so much to it, digging deep back into the history of the organization itself, speaking to people who had run-ins, whether they be victims or survivors themselves or people who were advocating for them. And so, yeah, then just diving into the public records that were available and speaking to some of these victims further and survivors and learning what they've had to go through to get some of this money. It was hard to hear their stories, but yeah, it was good to be able to shed some light on their experiences.
Mm-hmm. What did it, how did it make you feel, Austin, getting a chance to talk with some of these victims and hear their frustrations and their pain over not being able to move forward because of this in some ways?
Yeah, I definitely felt their frustration as well. Just showing us, some of the things that they were requesting that they felt they were promised or owed, and then showing us how representatives from the Colorado Healing Fund were speaking to them and denying some of these requests. I felt their pain, and it was empowering to be able to tell their stories and let people know, that maybe they should be looking into some of the organizations that they plan to donate to.
Mm-hmm. Katie, I know many viewers may be wondering if one donation site is actually a lot better than another, right? You see these come up and you're like, oh my gosh, is that the one I should donate to? Should I not? What should I do with my money? What did you find? Yeah, absolutely. It's a tough situation, right? You want to make sure that your money is going to somewhere where it's going to count. Mm-hmm. And we found that really at the bottom line is if you want to be generous, if you want to donate after something like this happens, you really got to do your homework. Look for an organization that pledges it will be donating 100% of the money that it raises to victims. Also look for an organization that is voluntarily doing independent audits and that those audits are posted on their website. Again, we asked the Colorado Healing Fund for copies of their audits and they refused to give them to us. They said that they don't make those public. So for some people, some nonprofits, some experts will say that that could potentially be a red flag, but of course those are things that we're still looking into. What about a timeline too, Katie? Are there timelines that people should some of these funds actually have like a timeline and say, okay, in 90 days you're going to get this and 60 more you're going to get this? I mean, is that something that's even available out there? Sure. Well, when these donations flood in, these organizations are collecting millions and millions of dollars. And so, sure, people want to make sure that it's being used appropriately and that it's not just all given out, erratically or maybe in an irresponsible way. However, it is also important for these people to get money immediately and to get that help and to use that money in whatever way they see fit. If these people want to go to Disney World, experts say it's important that if they should be able to go to Disney World to heal in that way if that's what's best for them. So, everybody's healing process looks different, but we have actually identified some potential solutions for more long-term funding means that could potentially help, mitigate some of these problems with nonprofits maybe not wanting to shell out the donations earlier on. Right. So, Austin, that of course leads me to the next question I was just thinking about. Austin, what's next in the investigation for you guys? What are you looking at what are you working on next?
So we are looking at victims and survivors of the Marshall Fire and sort of the difficulties they've had to navigate. As it pertains to Club Q, we are looking at the efforts among lawmakers to regulate or rein in the activities of nonprofits in the state. So we spoke to some lawmakers and they're sort of doing research and preparing for a potential future bill. We're also looking to get some public records, some open records from the state and see what sort of complaints they were aware of from the public. So we've requested emails and some other records from the governor's office, the Secretary of State's office, and the Attorney General's office. We've been quoted a lot of money from the governor's office. The Secretary of State's office said they needed to sort of check some different inboxes after initially saying they didn't have any, and we've yet to hear back from the Attorney General's office. So remains to be seen.
So Katie, these are some of the finding solutions that you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also, in our course of trying to get some information from some of those lawmakers, as Austin mentioned, we still have not received a response yet from the governor's office about that petition that we mentioned in the story. I think that's important to mention. We did check back in with them again this week, and still so far all we've heard is that they're reviewing the petition. So, but also some other, potential long-term solutions that might take a lot more work as we continue our research and look further into other incidents that have happened throughout the state's history. We've actually spoken with a father of a girl who was killed in the Virginia Tech shooting so many years ago, and he has since become quite the advocate for victims of mass tragedy, and has created a solution where a state-funded fund could be set up to help victims with long-term money that they might need for medical issues or therapy 3 years following any kind of incident. So this kind of helps with some of the concerns that people have about, well, if a state isn't going to solve these kinds of mass tragedies with things like gun control or maybe some other kind of legislation, whatever solutions they think might be necessary to help mitigate or rein in some of these mass tragedies, this could at least be a solution to potentially help ensure that people are taken care of when, unfortunately, something else might happen in the future.
Yeah. Katie, Austin, we both appreciate your insight and really giving us a better view of how you came about with this story. And Katie, of course, has her follow-up story on solutions to the issue on our website, cbscolorado.com.